Hello and welcome to Getting to Grips with Medieval Manuscripts Online, which is an event for European Researchers Night. I'm Mark Faulkner. I'm the Usher Assistant Professor in Medieval Literature in the School of English, and this is a 2-hour event from 6 to 8 p.m. It's organised, as I said, as part of European Researchers Night, and Francesca will put some hashtags in the chat if you want to tweet about how much fun you're having. It's also part of START. It's organised by me and the School of English in association with the library, and in particular with the Carnegie-funded Manuscripts for Medieval Studies project, which is part of Virtual Trinity, and you'll hear about both of those things tonight. As I said, this is a 2-hour event. There'll be a break of 5 or 10 minutes about halfway through. In the first half, we'll show you how you can use medieval manuscripts online. And in the second half, having got to grips with them, you will actually do some transcription. You'll actually read some medieval manuscripts, and you'll do that in small breakout rooms together. And then we'll come back together as a group and hear all about your experiences. Without further ado, then I'll launch us into the first hour. I'll remind you, if you can, to keep your video cameras off for this section, just to avoid any distractions and to keep yourselves on mute. And we are indeed recording this session, the first half, but not the second half. So I'll hand you over to Estelle Gittins, who's an archivist and the lead on the Carnegie funded Manuscripts for Medieval Studies project, to talk to you about Virtual Trinity and digitization's place in that.
Thanks very, very much, Mark. And I'd just like to say thank you to everyone involved in European Researchers Night, and especially to Francesca at the Long Room Hub, who's just been so brilliant in helping us with all the technology. It's a pleasure to speak to you as part of this event, and I just want to extend a very warm welcome from the Library of Trinity College Dublin. Many of you may recognise this picture, may recognise this interior. It's the long room of the old library of Trinity College. It's one of 9 library buildings housing over 7 million books and many more electronic resources, which make it the largest library in Ireland. Now, the old library, this room is home to 200,000 early printed books and around 20,000 collections of manuscripts and archives. And among them are around 600 medieval manuscripts and manuscripts and 1 book of Kells. The library has existed ever since the university's foundation in 1592 and has had a number of periods of expansion and development. And we're currently embarking on a transformational new phase. So we have 2 major development projects underway at the moment to respond to the future needs and uses of the library. 1 physical project, 1 digital project, and both very long term. You can see there, they're both for future generations. The old library redevelopment project, this one aims to conserve the historic building as well as providing a state-of-the-art reading room for our researchers and a reimagined Book of Kells exhibition. And the Virtual Trinity Library programme, it's a really ambitious programme to properly respond to the digital shift that we've all been experiencing and to enable the library's collections to be made available online and accessible free of charge at the click of a button. The aim of the Virtual Trinity Library programme is to scale up digitisation across 9 key collection areas, medieval manuscripts perhaps being the most prominent one. The aims are to seek funding for a whole range of diverse projects, not just to digitise, but also to catalogue, conserve, research, and to share the collections, and to build on the research potential for these collections within Trinity, but also with a global audience in mind. We also want to work with new technologies to enhance the potential of the digitised collections and to form new networks and partnerships with other libraries around the world. We currently have a couple of projects underway, another one to catalogue the Fargo collection of early printed books, which is an astounding library collected in the Netherlands in the 18th century, and the Kula Press collections, and they contain artwork, records, photograph, business records, all produced by the arts and crafts business set up by the Yates sisters. I don't need to explain to this audience, I think, how important digitized versions of manuscripts are for research in medieval studies. Being able to access a unique medieval object from your computer rather than having to travel to see it has revolutionized research in the field. Research that could take weeks to conduct on site can be conducted in an afternoon from thousands of miles away from the manuscript's physical location. So making more manuscripts available to more users is always our aim. Some of the high-profile manuscripts that are already online include the Book of Kells, the Book of Durrow, and other treasures of medieval Ireland, including the books of Armagh, Dimming, and Mulla, but there are many more still to do. So our project that Mark mentioned earlier is one of the flagship projects for the Virtual Trinity Library programme. We are called Manuscripts for Medieval Studies because the selection of manuscripts being worked on are those which are used for teaching the medieval period within Trinity. They are 16 medieval manuscripts of international research significance and include important manuscripts from Salisbury and Canterbury cathedrals, which were dispersed during the dissolution of the monasteries, as well as famous works of medieval art, the Winchcombe Psalter and the Life of St. Alban by Matthew Paris, which is pictured here. The aim is to share collections with communities around the world to catalyse research and educational dissemination, which is exactly what we're hoping to do with this very session tonight. And the texts that you will see as part of this session come out of this project. We're very excited to be using them in this way. The project is very generously funded by the Carnegie Corporation of New York and was especially championed by their late president, Vartan Gregorian, the man who had the helm of the New York Public Library for so many years. Carnegie have a long and distinguished history in supporting libraries, and we're very, very proud to continue this tradition into the future. We've been able to secure a wonderful project team to focus on this work. Our archivist and project manager, Alison Ray, you'll be hearing from her later, also photographer Caroline Harding and conservator Laura O'Farrell. And they're all supported by a steering group made up of library colleagues and of course our academic expert, Dr. Mark Faulkner, who you've just met. We're halfway through and we've published a number of the project manuscripts online already, including, as I said, all of the texts used this evening. If you would like to follow our progress, you can do so via the Virtual Trinity Library site, where our blogs appear on the news page, or follow us on Twitter or Instagram. And you can access the outputs of the project, the full digitized manuscripts, on the library's digital collection site. And that's my cue to hand over to Jenny Doyle, our digital content creation manager, who will talk you through the site.
Thanks very much, Estelle. I'm delighted to be here tonight on European Researchers Night to talk about our digital collections platform. I'm just going to try and share the screen properly. Now, I hope you can see this. It's always the tricky bit at the start. Can everybody see my first slide there? So I'm just going to give you, Estelle has given a great kind of context around Virtual Trinity, and I'm just going to give you a brief introduction to the digital collections platform and its functionality so that you can get an idea of what it actually looks like to get to grips with manuscripts online. Then I'm going to transfer to Caroline Harding, who's our senior photographer with the Carnegie Medieval Manuscripts Project, did a recording of the imaging process. So that's kind of, there's a bit of detail there. Just for info, my own background is as an archivist dealing with modern literary manuscripts and photographic collections in the National Library of Ireland previously. And then I was digitisation programme manager before coming to Trinity in 2019 to take up the role of digital content creation manager. And as part of that job, my main responsibility is to increase the volume of digitised content collections available online for researchers and for anyone else who's interested in using these materials. I'm also the Virtual Trinity Programme Manager, which Estelle has mentioned there. So that's our sort of our strategic digitisation programme. So Digital Collections is the platform where you can access the library's digitised content. It was launched in May 2020.
Jenny, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but could I ask you just to speak up a little bit louder? Some people are struggling to hear you a little. Thank you. Apologies.
No problem. Sorry about that. We were having some technical issues yesterday with the sound as well. So I'll try and shout a little bit more. So Digital Collections is the platform where you can access the library's digitized content. It was launched in May 2020, and it's still very much a work in progress. Just before we started here this evening, actually, my colleague, the systems analyst, sent an email saying that we had just done a new release. So we're constantly trying to make changes and upgrade the platform and improve the functionality. So the digital collections continues our commitment to extend the accessibility of our collections, as well as providing new functionalities to enable enhanced interactions with our digital collections. It contains all the digitized materials that were previously available in the first digital collections, and we'll be adding new content that we create through the Virtual Trinity Library program. We also run a program of exhibitions and digitization on demand, and we add that into digital collections too. So the idea is that everything that we digitize will be ingested and available for researchers. In addition to the digital collections platform, the library provides storage, backup, and digital preservation support for all digital content created by the library. The previous library strategy in 2015 to 2020 identified digitization as a key strategic priority. Digital collections is critical to the advancement and acceleration of the library's capacity to create, catalogue, preserve, and deliver digital content. Virtual Trinity Library is our strategic digitization program to open up our unique analog collections for global access and to stimulate new research. The pandemic, of course, has only served to highlight this goal. Teaching and learning and research accelerated online. I think in some instances it was actually overnight. So just a bit about the technology that we use. The digital collections uses open source software, Hierarch Samvera at the front end, Fedora Commons repository software at the back, with Solar as the search platform. Hierarch allows us to provide hierarchical structure to our digitized materials where it's required. It also allows us to group together for presentation traditionally unconnected objects in curated collections. We can also include an object in more than one collection, so we can kind of curate across the board. In 2019, we also invested heavily in storage infrastructure, which enables the long-term preservation of the large digital files that are created to comply with the highest standards of cultural heritage imaging. We aim to adhere to the principle of digitize once, do it right. So a multidisciplinary team of an archivist, digital cataloger, systems analyst, preservation librarian, as well as a team of skilled digital photographers are behind the scenes, working with colleagues from research collections and preservation and conservation to catalogue, preserve, digitize, and make these collections available. The Oscar Wilde papers, papers from the Clark Stained Glass Studios collections can also be found alongside the Book of Kells and all the other treasures that Estelle mentioned earlier on there, the Book of Dimming and Armagh, etc. One of our aims is to use innovative software in digital collections. So Hierarch software uses the universal viewer to display our images and enable deep zoom. So I'm going to show you this now in a second when I'm finished with the slides. It also enables the use of IIIF, which is International Image Interoperability Framework, which is basically a set of open standards that help archives, libraries, and museums make the most of their digitized collections. So you can deep zoom, you can annotate and do more as well. So digital collections has IIIF enabled images has enabled IIIF for all of its ingested images, which is over 10,000 at the moment. So IIIF compatibility allows our users to drag and drop high resolution images from our repository into an external viewer to compare with images from other IIIF compliant repositories. The IIIF manifests are mainly text and image based at the moment. The library is also part of the READ Cooperative, which is developing the Transcribus tool, which is a tool to enable automatic transcription of manuscript text. As we add more to our body of digitized content, we hope to make more use of these kinds of technologies and to work with researchers and partners to facilitate interaction with and use of digitized content. So I'm just going to change my screen here and try and get onto digital collections so I can show you what it looks like. I hope you can see that there now. This is the home page of digital collections where you can actually access all of the content. And I think you'll be going onto it later on for doing the transcription. The home page, you can see we have these different tiles, which are some of our curated collections. Medieval Latin manuscripts, there, Romance language manuscripts. quite a few as we've added more and more content. There's a bit of variety as well. There's the Book of Kells there too. And then as you go down the page, you can see featured works, and you can click onto recently uploaded works. So I'm just going to focus on the kind of attractive manuscript, I think, that you're probably all extremely familiar with. When you click into one of the collections, you can actually search within it. So I'm going to search for the Dublin Apocalypse. So I'm just putting in the manuscript number, MS64. I've tested this, so I'm hoping that it will work tonight. Worked earlier. Click it down again. Yeah, we can see it here. So this is the Dublin Apocalypse. We click on here, and this brings you up to the viewer. So this is what we were talking about earlier. This is the universal viewer, which shows where you can do the deep zoom. So I'm just scrolling a little bit there. On the side of on the left-hand side of the screen here, there's a little thumbnails of all the images from the volume. When Estelle was talking earlier about digitization, opening up research, this is a really good example because it's quite a small volume, and I think it's very difficult to handle and get access to in the reading room. But you can click onto a page that you want to go onto, and you can see the deep zoom viewer. Now, my screen is a very small laptop screen, which isn't properly color calibrated, so you're not really getting the full benefit of the lovely gold and blues and reds, but you can get a real sense of the detail. You can see the expression so clearly in the illustrations there. One of the things that you can do as well, and this little button over here, you can download, and you can download the detail here that's just within the viewer, or you can download the whole image at different sizes. This little toggle here for it to share, this is what when we were talking about the IIIF sharing the manifest. You click, you drag and drop this into another viewer, and you'll be able to see manuscripts side by side. I was trying to test it earlier, but my broadband won't hold up to do it. So I have a little picture I can show you later. But the other sort of functionality that we have is all of this, as you can see here, is part of the metadata that we create. So you can download the metadata, and if you do that, it'll open up in another tab. So that's all the metadata. That's what it looks like. And then I just try and get back onto the proper digital collections. Sorry, bear with me. Just there. So there's a lot, we've DOIs, which are digital object identifiers, which are basically a way that you're able to persistently identify the objects if you cite them in your work. This DOI will mean that it's always there. It prevents kind of things like link rot and that, so you won't get weird 404 messages if somebody tries to actually access the manuscript that you're citing. And then when you go down here, you can go into, you can see sort of this particular manuscript has a lot of information at the page level. You can see this. Again, you're back into the viewer to get into the deep zoom, and you can turn the pages, manipulate it up there, as you can see. Then if you go here onto this title, you get some more information. You get more metadata. So it gives you details of the digital file. You can see here that it underwent a checksum when it was being ingested. And this is part of our intention to preserve and to have a proper digital preservation program and policy. And you can also then see here some technical metadata around the camera, the date it was taken, the camera model, the flash, the other f-stop information and that kind of thing. So I think that's just a sort of to give you an idea. Back on the home page here on digital collections. It'll bring you back into this. But there's some search tips. There's videos to help you if you want to search for items, and there's videos there. You can get back to Virtual Trinity, and you can get back to the library's homepage too. So I think that is probably a good moment to ask Francesca to introduce Caroline's video, which will demonstrate the whole imaging process, and that will give you an insight into the digitization studios and how we actually generate the images and ingest them for digital collections. Thanks very much.
Chester Beatty, producing cultural heritage reprographic photography of 3D and 2D objects, similar to my current role. A fundamental aim within the digitization process is to produce high-quality reprographic images which are produced in line with the imaging standards set by the federal agency's digital initiative. Our aim is to ensure correct exposure and color accuracy to the highest quality. Also, during the digitization process, it is our aim to ensure the best safety for each object whilst the object is being photographed and whilst maneuvering each object. The studio equipment that I use for the digitization process consists of a motorized conservation book cradle, which is used to position and stabilize each manuscript as well as the camera. You can see the conservation book cradle I use in the picture to the right. Along with the conservation book cradle, the camera I use is a Hasselblad H5D 200C multi-shot digital medium format camera, which has a 50 megapixel sensor. This is soon to be upgraded with a Phase 1 XF IQ4 150 megapixel digital medium format camera. And this will be able to produce images even higher with an even higher resolution than our current camera, the Hasselblad. For lighting, I use a Bowens flash pack equipped with a twin set of Bowens flash heads, which are equipped with softbox attachments to diffuse the light sources. For exposure and color correction and color calibration, I use what is known as an X-ray color checker chart, which is displayed in this slide here. The digitization software that we use for screen calibration for all of our screens used for digitization is the Easer color calibration software. We color calibrate our screens every few weeks to maintain color accuracy and consistency of each of our screens used for digitization. The image capture software I use is called Focus by Hasselblad. And for all of our post-production work, we use Adobe Photoshop and Adobe Bridge. Before setting up the studio, I need to make sure the humidity levels are not too high or not too low, so it is safe for the manuscripts to be exposed. Then when I am setting up the studio sheet, I will open Focus software and make sure all settings are correct and all adjustments are set to 0. I also need to make sure Focus is set to reproduction mode. This means there will be no added contrast or curve to the image. We also always shoot in RAW format in reproduction photography, so we have as much flexibility and control as possible over our images. In our studios, we use the same standard lighting for roughly 80% of our setup, which consists of one flash head placed on either side of the conservation book cradle, positioned at a meter distance from the cradle and angled downwards at a 45-degree angle towards the subject. Once the lighting software is set up, once the lighting and software is set up, I correct the white balance and exposure and conduct a scene-cast calibration. This is a screenshot of the Focus image capture software interface with an image of the X-ray color checker chart displayed. To correct the white balance, I take a photograph of the X-ray color checker and then click on the F5 palette on the image of the X-ray color checker as seen in the Focus software and is circled in red in the photo. This will automatically adjust the white balance. This step needs to be done to correct any color cast caused by the flash units and makes the whites appear white. I then make sure the light settings and exposure are correct by capturing multiple images of the X-ray color checker chart and referring to what is known as the red, green, and blue, or RGB values, as they are displayed in Focus. The RGB values are circled in blue. I will repeat this step and adjust the light settings until the RGB readings from the D5 palette circled in green are an ideal exposure value. I then conduct a lens cast or scene calibration by capturing a white piece of paper and using a setting in the Focus software to remove any vignetting or exposure drop-off caused by the lens. The motorized conservation book cradle is basically the backbone to all of the digitization work we do of the medieval manuscript collection within the Library of Trinity. We use the conservation book cradle to safely stabilize and position all of our medieval manuscripts for image capture. And positioning the manuscript on the conservation book cradle would be our next step. The next step after the initial lighting and exposure setup is complete. Conservation book cradle is fully motorized and can fit objects up to 25 kilograms in weight with dimensions up to roughly 80 by 60 centimeters. The camera can be moved by an actuator horizontally and vertically, which minimizes the need to move the object directly. The top of the page rests on top of what is called a vacuum bar, which is also used to keep the page flat. There is a laser pointer which is used to position each page so that it is in line with the camera plane, which is on a 45-degree angle. The cradle itself is moved up and down to position each page so it is in the same angle as the camera plane. To give a more clearer picture, here is a short demonstration video of how I set up a manuscript page for image capture using the conservation book cradle with a physics textbook as a subject. So first, the vacuum bar is covered by a piece of black industrial cloth. The vacuum bar has already been adjusted for the length of the book. So the vacuum bar slides down and the page is positioned directly on top of the vacuum holes, the vacuum bar, and the laser is turned on and the cradle is moved up and down until the laser runs fully across the page. And this indicates that the page is in the same angle as the camera plane. And the vacuum bar can be turned on to keep the page flat. And the image is taken. Then to remove the page, the vacuum bar needs to be fully turned off. The page is secured by a snake weight. And then the vacuum bar needs to be lifted up before the next page is positioned. In the digitization process, correct file naming and metadata is very important, especially when you are creating a digital surrogate of a manuscript containing many folios. The file name for each image captured for the Carnegie project includes the manuscript's shelf mark, number, otherwise known as the MS number, as well as the sequence number of the image as it appears within the entirety of the digital surrogate. Metadata is embedded with each image and is added during post-processing. The metadata added to each image includes the department each of the medieval manuscripts are stored within, which is the Manuscripts and Archives collection. The added metadata also includes where and when the image was captured. The final stage of the digitization process is the post-processing stage. To begin with, the raw files are exported from Focus as Adobe RGB 16-bit master TIFFs. Adobe RGB is the color space embedded with each image. The 16-bit TIFFs are then reprocessed through Photoshop to include metadata. Then a high-resolution Adobe 98 JPEG surrogate is made from the master TIFF file, and any cropping is saved to the JPEG surrogate only and not to the master TIFF. Each file then goes through quality assurance by another photographer within the digital collections department. Once the files have passed quality assurance, they are ready for online upload. The JPEGs are uploaded to our digital collections online. Once both are reprocessed 16-bit master TIFF files and JPEG surrogates are archived in long-term digital storage. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation. And I'm very sorry I could not be there on the night, but now I will pass it on to Tony.
Actually, I think yeah, we had a slight change in running order, so I think now it's okay. Alison is going to speak.
Great, thank you so much. Let me just share my screen. Ooh. That's that I am sharing. Great. Now, thank you so much to everyone for coming this evening. I'm Alison Ray, the project manager and archivist for the Manuscripts for Medieval Studies project funded by the Carnegie Corporation of New York. And as part of my role, I use my expertise in medieval manuscripts to research and catalog our project collections, which includes examining their textual content, decoration, codicological features, and provenance to create catalog records for library readers to consult. I also take part in outreach activities such as creating digital content for the library's website and social media, as well as planning events relating to collection themes. So this evening, I'm just going to explore with you some features of the manuscript page, as well as a quick activity afterwards. So modern readers today rely on design features found in the pages of printed books to navigate their way through the text. But did you know that medieval manuscripts were read in much the same way? We're going to look at the design features added by scribes to medieval pages using a 14th century Latin Vulgate Bible produced in East Anglia in England and recently digitized as part of our project. This decorated single volume Bible features layout elements typically found in books of the Middle Ages to guide readers when consulting their manuscripts. And here's some quick facts on manuscripts to start. So first, the word manuscript itself comes from the Latin words manu and scriptus, meaning written by hand. Many manuscripts were produced by a team of scribes and artists rather than just by one person. And the pigments used in manuscripts are made from a wide range of animal, plant, and mineral materials. And most importantly of all, most manuscripts are written on parchment, the skin of cows, goats, or sheep. Vellum, a particular type of parchment, is made from calf skin. So the first feature we're going to look at are running titles. So the pages of medieval manuscripts were rarely numbered, so readers first looked to running titles at the top of the page to locate individual books or chapters of works. This medieval Bible features running titles in Latin for each biblical book, in eye-catching blue ink with red penwork decoration, such as here you can see the word Danielis for the book of Daniel. Next, we have Rubric. So the opening of new passages in manuscripts is commonly highlighted with text in red ink, known as Rubric, to stand out from the page for the notice of readers. The opening of the book of Daniel in this Bible is indicated where I've highlighted there the phrase Incipit Liber Danielis. Here begins the book of Daniel. Red inks were generally made from natural minerals like lead. And as well as text guidelines, sorry, there we go. Ooh, flipping through here. So as well as text guidelines, luxury manuscripts such as this Bible feature decoration to accompany the main text, and some forms of decoration functioned as visual navigational aids to the reader. The beginning of each new book in this Bible opens with a decorated initial of the first letter of the opening word of text. In this example of 2 Maccabees, the text opens with a decorated initial of the letter F for the Latin word fratribus, and the image depicts a man kneeling in prayer before the Virgin and Child. Biblical prologues in this manuscript also open with smaller initials with gold decoration. The use of gold in manuscripts like this one is often referred to as illumination, as the gold literally illuminates or lights up the page to readers. And then as well, to arrange the text clearly for the reader, each biblical book is then ordered into numbered chapters. And interestingly, the numbered chapters we use today originate from this period of the Middle Ages. So this text is actually quite familiar to people if you consult the Bible. Each new chapter begins in this manuscript with blue initials decorated with red pen flourishing and accompanied by chapter numbers in blue ink. For example, the 13th chapter of 2 Corinthians opens with the initial Eke, or letter E, and the first line of text is followed by the Roman numerals that you can see. It says XIII, representing the number 13. And as well as features added by scribes, readers of medieval manuscripts themselves frequently added their own navigational aids to books to highlight useful or interesting passages. Here, a reader has evidently studied the text of 2 Parapomenon with care, as they added marginal notations to passages of the text. So highlighted in red here are nota marks, and which literally mean that they're taking note of the text for future reference. A reader below this has also drawn a hand pointing at the text, and this is known as manicula or little hands. I hope this quick guide helps modern readers to take note themselves and explore the fascinating features of medieval manuscripts on our website. And now, following my quick kind of presentation, we're going to get you to do a little activity, if you're happy to do so, where we have an activity sheet where we're going to identify the features on the provided page by using the digitized manuscript on the TCD Digital Collections website. So we have the activity sheet, I believe, with Francesca, as well as the web links to access. And afterwards, we're going to do a quick Zoom poll to see if you can guess the features that we've highlighted. So let's see. So Francesca, how would you like to best share the activity sheet?
So I will just pop it in, the link in. Is that the easiest way to?
I think so. That would be amazing. Thank you. So what we're going to do is we're just popping the link into the chat, is that the activity sheet is a PDF file that has instructions for, if you check out the page, I've included a picture of a full folio page from this manuscript. And I've just highlighted features 1 to 6. And then there's 2 links you can follow that will take you to the Digital Collections website. to check out and see the page without so you can see the hidden features and you can try out the poll quiz.
Apologies, sorry, it didn't copy fully over, so it's just in the chat there if everyone would like to click on it. I can also share it on screen if that's helpful as well.
It'll probably be super as well that we can show the image.
Perfect. Is that okay for you, Alison?
That's fantastic. Thank you. So if anybody has any questions, just pop them into the chat. And if you're having any difficulties, we can pop also the link to the manuscript on the website. Perfect. Ooh.
And Alison, just let me know when you'd like me to open up the poll.
Super. I think we'll give everybody 5 minutes to have a play and we'll see. And everybody just, if you have any questions, just pop them into the chat. I'm happy to help.
would you like me to launch the poll?
Yeah, that'd be super, please. We'll give everybody 1 more minute and then we'll go through the answer. What I can do as well is I can share the image on my screen too for people having difficulties. Okay, so this is the page for anyone who's having any issues. So here's number 1 here. 2 and 3 are here. 4, I think, is here. Here's 5. And number 6. I love number 6. Let's see that page. Great. So will I just go through the poll answers quickly? I'll do that. Great. So the poll questions were, what was the feature that was number 1 at the top of the page? So the answer to that was a running title. And the letters for those who are able to access the image, you can see is the letters EXO for the Book of Exodus. Number 2, how did Rubric stand out to readers? Is C, written in red ink. So this text here, the answer is it was marking the end of the book of Genesis and marking the start of the book of Exodus. And the number 3 for the letter, does this initial show, is the letter H for the Latin word hec, and is featuring a depiction of the parting of the Red Sea that occurs in this text. And number 4, what number is this chapter? So the answer is number 2, that it was in Roman numerals that look like the number 11, but it's number 2. 5, what is the purpose of nota marks? The answer is to highlight useful or interesting passages of text, but these are notes often left by readers. And finally, what is the dog doing? So the dog is B, spinning plates. The manuscripts often have humorous images in the margins, showing those depicted and engaged in medieval pastimes, which is really fun. So thank you so much for attempting my little activity. And now we're going to move on to Mark and his fantastic work on the TCD MPhil program and with manuscripts.
Thank you, Alison. I'm going to speak very, very briefly, and then we're going to have a break, and then we're going to come back and do some transcription, or try to do some transcription of a manuscript together. Let me just share my slides. So I wanted to try and give you a very quick flavor of just how exciting this digitization is and the amazing range of things it facilitates. I'm not that old. I did finished my PhD in 2008, but it's fair to say that the way that we handle manuscripts has been totally revolutionized in the last 13 years. When I started my PhD, at various points, my supervisor would hand me a stack of paper, which was images of manuscripts, and I would go and photocopy them and file them assiduously away. And that's a photograph of one of the files I still have. And probably in 4 or 5 years, I'll be able to throw this away because all of these manuscripts will be online. You can just access them at the click of a button, and they will be perfect zoomable images, not these ropey things that have been through a photocopier 25 times and are now practically illegible. So it's really hard to overstate how significant having these manuscripts accessible at the click of a button is, both in the way they make learning about script more easy and more accessible. In terms of research, it's also had a revolutionary effect, this digitization, because you often now don't need to go to libraries anymore. You can consult a very large number of manuscripts online, and you don't have that considerable degree of planning and long delays to particular projects. And research in general, I think, is considerably more accurate, because if you encounter something in a book, you can often access the manuscript at the click of a button and check what that book says, whereas before, you either had to be very patient and wait several months to do it, or just assume that the book was right. Looking forward the next 10 or 20 years, there are some amazing things that are going to be made possible by digitization of manuscripts. Digitization raises the possibility that the totality of the surviving evidence for medieval textual culture will be available to us and interrogable digitally. At the moment, that sounds like a dream, but it's already to some extent possible for 21st century culture because of things like Google Books, which have digitized approximately 10% of everything printed since 1900 and enable you to model culture in really interesting ways. So I don't know if anyone has ever used Google Ngrams, but it's basically a measure of the frequency of particular words through time. And I've shown you the graph for men and women there between 1800 and 2000. And you can see that there's a point around about 1980 where women become mentioned more frequently than men in published books, and it's crossed back over again. And so you can do quite amazing things with this, like in this paper I put there from Science, quantitative analysis of culture using millions of digitized books. That will be possible for the Middle Ages soon. And you can play your part in that, because to do that, we require the texts to be transcribed from surviving manuscripts. Work is, as Jenny mentioned, ongoing in projects like Transcribus to teach computers to read medieval script. But all of those projects are based on machine learning and require training data produced by humans. And that's what we're going to try and do in the second half, and we're going to try and crowdsource a transcription of one of the project manuscripts as a start to perhaps training the computer to read the script of the rest of that manuscript. So what we'll do now is we'll take a break for perhaps 7 or so minutes, and we'll resume at 5 minutes past 7. And I'll give you a quick 10-minute introduction to how to transcribe things, and then we'll break into breakout rooms, and you'll have a go at transcribing a bit of the manuscript for us to produce this crowdsourced transcript. So a break of about 7 minutes till 5 past 7, and we'll resume then. Thank you. Okay, so it is bypassed by my phone, so I will resume and launch us into this transcribathon. And to help you do that, we'll introduce you to the manuscript we're going to be looking at and how we might go about reading it. So this is the manuscript we're going to be looking at. It's one of the projects digitized as part of the Carnegie project. It's manuscript 174. It was produced at Salisbury in Wiltshire in England over quite a prolonged period, maybe 30 years or so in the late 11th, early 12th century. Manuscripts from Salisbury in this period are particularly interesting because you see about 20 or 30 scribes collaborating, and it seems to correspond with a real attempt to increase the library during initially in the time that Osmond was bishop, and then going on into Roger of Salisbury's period as bishop. The manuscript is a collection of saints' lives, and we're going to be having a go at the life of St. Giles. These are the basic letter forms you'll encounter, and one of the reasons that I chose this manuscript for us to have a go at is because the basic letter forms are ones that we're still familiar with and we would still use it in the kind of handwriting that gets taught even in the 21st century. So I put together a kind of alphabet for you here, starting from the left. So we've got A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. There's really no J in the period this manuscript was produced. And while K was used, it's quite rare. L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U. There's really no V in the period and no W, X, and then Y and Z do exist, but they're very rare letters. Beneath some of the letters, you'll see that there is another letter form, and these are letter forms for which variants existed. So sometimes there was more than one way of writing a particular letter. So this A, which is much taller than the normal A, is what tends to get referred to quite picturesquely as parrot-beaked A, because it looks a bit like the beak of a parrot. There's, in addition to this straight-backed D, there's also one with a round back. In addition to what we might think of as a lowercase n, there's also this one that looks more like a capital form of n. And then for R, there's this form, which can be a little bit confusing because it does look a little bit like an I, that generally gets referred to as two-shaped R. So those are the basic letter forms, and hopefully they're relatively familiar to you because, as I say, they are the ones that we still use by and large in 21st century handwriting. There are a few letter forms, though, that you'll see when you get your bit of the manuscript that are much less familiar and are not used today. So one of those is E cordata at the bottom, literally tailed E. The best way to transcribe that is E with a hook, as I've done it there. You can find that through the symbol portion of Word, for example. And then there are various ligatures, and ligatures are where letters are joined together. So in the script of this manuscript, there are really only 3 ligatures. There's a ligature of C and T, there's a ligature of S and T, and there's a ligature of E and T, which is the origin of the present day ampersand, which looks like the final thing on the right there. So those are the basic letter forms, and with that in mind, we can have a look at a single line from the manuscript and transcribe it. So we have, starting on the left, we have a C, an A, a U, a T, and an A, so the Latin word cauta. Then we have a D, an E, an L, an I, and a B, and there's a line on that B, which is an abbreviation that I'll come back to, an A, a T, an I, an O, an N, and an E. The abbreviation in this case resolves itself to an ER, and we'll talk about how to interpret abbreviations in a second. So this is deliberazione. And then we have PRASCI, Prasci, D, that round back D, ECREUERUNT, decreverunt, fideles, FI, round back D, ELES, and the S's I should have probably mentioned are very different to the kind of S's that we would be used to. They're tall and sit on the line. And then we have MULTI, MODA, multimoda. And then we have a P with a hook on it, which is another abbreviation, in this case for RO. PROS, that tall S sitting on the line, ECUTIONE, prosecuzione, and then finally CELEBRA, celebra. So hopefully that is not too frightening and scary, but that you can actually distinguish the letter forms and align my transcription with what you see. Any transcription needs to be principled, and I've tried to select the ones that are simplest but also most useful for the aim that we might have, which is, as I said, digitizing the totality of medieval textual culture, a very modest aim. So we're going to transcribe the text as it stands. So you'll often find that scribes corrected each other's work. We're not going to try and recover what the scribe originally wrote. We're just going to try and represent what the manuscript says at this point in time. We'll modernize capitalization and word division. We'll silently expand abbreviations, and we'll reproduce manuscript punctuation. And the marks of punctuation will be relatively unfamiliar to you. Unlike the letter forms, there are 3 marks of punctuation used in the text we're transcribing. There's a dot, like a modern day full stop, which is called a punctus, and is the lightest form of punctuation. It's probably the equivalent of a comma in its weight. Then there's the punctus elevatus, which is like an upside down semicolon that has the weight really of a semicolon in terms of the kind of pause it indicates. And then there's the punctus versus, which is like a semicolon in appearance, but has the weight of a full stop. So those are the 3 marks of punctuation, and I've suggested how you might transcribe them underneath. There's no symbol on your keyboard that corresponds to a punctus elevatus, so it's generally transcribed as a full stop and then an inverted comma. I've mentioned that you're going to encounter abbreviations, and my key advice here is not to be scared. This is supposed to be fun. There are going to be some that you can't resolve, but we'll be there to help you. In the breakout rooms, I've put some of the most common ones that you'll encounter on this slide, and we'll be making available these as a PDF for you to use when you're in the breakout rooms having a go at the transcription. So the most frequent mark you'll encounter is what's called the common mark of abbreviation in the first line of my slide there, which is basically a bar above a letter. That indicates either an M or an N. So it's an M in enim, and it's an N in devozione. Then there are various abbreviations which correspond to Latin inflections. So there's a 2-shaped mark for tur, a comma-shaped mark for tus, a bar for ter, and a 2-shaped R with a stroke through it for aurum. Then there are various abbreviations involving P and Q, some abbreviations for short words, and abbreviations for the nomina sacra, the words used for God or Jesus, so Sanctus, Dei, Christum. As you can imagine, they crop up quite frequently in saints' lives, so there are a standard set of abbreviations used for them. So with those in mind, we can have one final practice before we send you into the breakout rooms to have another go, to have a go for yourselves. So here are 3 lines from the manuscript. We have a big, round, capital D, which thanks to Alison, you will now know is rubricated. So DA, then we've got that abbreviation for Vero, Dominica, Dum, Sacra, Dum with the common mark of abbreviation, Dum, Sacra, Mysteria with ST ligature in the middle, Celebra Rentur with the two-shaped mark indicating you are, Punctus, Forte Quidam Mise Reptus, Demonio across the line break from a demon, Capit Terribilibus Vocibus Clamare Donec Fere Tota Turbaretur Ecclesia. So there, the cross on the L gives us the ESI. I shouldn't have put that in brackets, given the transcription conventions I said we were using. Sed Egidius qui ibi aderet more solito prius humi prostratus breviter with that bar on the T for ER, oravit with a two-shaped R, and then statim quae Q with a dot is quae. So hopefully that has given you a very quick introduction to the transcription. What we're going to do now is send you into breakout rooms. We'll paste a link to a Google document into the chat, and that Google document will take you to 10 lines or so of the manuscript and some space to transcribe it. One of us will join you in the breakout room to offer you some help, and we just want you to have a go at this for maybe 20-25 minutes, and then we'll reassemble at the end and see how we've done with the task.